This is the No Stroke Podcast with your co-hosts David Dancero and Michael Garrow, helping you to support and thrive in life after stroke. Their podcast is designed for educational and community support purposes only and should not replace medical treatment and guidance of your own health professional team.
Hi, Sarah, and welcome to the No Stroke Podcast. Great to have you here.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
For sure. So I know David and yourself connected back at the Rehab Tech Summit a couple of years ago, and we've had Lauren on, and to kind of speak to some of the work that they're really highlighting, and this aging in space is your kind of bread and butter, and a lot of what you've been focused on over the last few years. So I'd love to, we have a lot of stuff, again, based on your experience. There's so much we could dive into here. But for our listeners, can you just give, kind of a bit of background, your professional history and where you are today?
Sure. So I'm an occupational therapist by clinical background, and very quickly in my career, starting about 20 years ago, started to advise health tech, digital tech, and age tech companies on everything from UI, UX to product development and go-to-market strategy. And I learned quickly in my career that as I was advising for the point of piloting within aging services and geriatric services, I basically would give them access to patient feedback and clinician feedback and focus groups, and quickly decided that it was a sweet spot for me in general to bring kind of these age tech services and age tech solutions to market. And I led global innovation for Genesis Healthcare for years, including designing their innovation center in China, helping with the joint venture they had with the Chinese government to bring new solutions for aging services with tech-enabled care delivery. And with that role, sat at Aging2.0, which at the time had just launched in San Francisco. So we had an accelerator program for 2 years that I helped to advise. And then I also helped as we grew the 150 chapters around the world with quarterly age tech events. I brought some of that expertise, both clinically and operationally, into the providers and the buyers and individuals who were helping to acquire and invest in the age tech world, as well as advising the startups that were entering the space, really to look at how they're addressing the mature consumer, how are they looking at human-centered design. And so my whole world, especially in the last 15 years, has been at this intersection. It's pretty easy to follow, and it makes a lot more sense, even though I have a non-traditional path. If you look to see these 3 buckets, it's really age tech startups or health tech startups in the aging space, trying to make a difference in the world on how we age. And then the buyer side being everything from consumer brands, trying to understand the maturing consumer, to health systems, payers, post-acute rehab centers, REITs that are building buildings and want greater efficiency, any of the buyers that are looking at new technologies and new innovations across the world, and how are they improving the experience within their sphere of influence. And then the third bucket being the venture capital world, and how to decrease that noise as they're looking at this really challenging landscape. People are cropping up in the startup landscape with various solutions, but how do you really know how to vet them and how to know what's going to hit the market and be successful? And so those are the 3 buckets along the way. And when Aging2.0 recently sold, I spun off a consulting firm that just does the same thing that I was doing within Aging2.0. So I own a consulting firm called Delight by Design, and we really look at everything from product, spaces, experiences, and brands, all for the aging side of things and longevity. And we're just looking to kind of improve the experience across all of those sectors. And then I know we'll get into it a little bit later, but in that advisory capacity, what I had happen was I found that everyone I was talking to during the pandemic, whether it's an age tech startup I was advising, or a venture capital partner with a portfolio of companies, or a buyer like a senior living provider, they all wanted to talk about staffing. And so one of the companies that I was consulting for I realized had an entity in Guadalajara, Mexico, and the company was called MezTal. But at the time, it was really only servicing its own founding clients because they needed to find engineers and call center employees and really help to fill some vacancies. So I came in a year ago as an advisor and then investor and as a partner as CEO to bring them to market to help really anyone that I was working with across the continuum. If they had open positions for remote that could be managed remotely, we can hire them out of Guadalajara, Mexico. Really talented people, passionate people who are mission driven. And the total cost is about 40 to 50% less than a fully loaded position in the US. So helping with some cost savings in the health system and the health tech system and AgeTech, while also just filling critical roles with really talented people. So I've had a journey. It's been a unique one, and I continue to just sit in the middle of aging and our perceptions on aging and how we build products and design spaces and experiences.
Wow, Sarah, thank you so much. That's great background, and you've been busy since we originally met at the Rehab Tech Summit, or after that as well. I have to ask you too. I've looked at more of what you're doing online since that summit. Your name comes up a lot in the rehab tech and AgeTech. But for those who are looking for the first time, I just want to clarify: there's another Sarah Thomas out there. You're not by chance the NFL. You're not dabbling as the NFL.
I'm not.
Okay. All right. So folks Googling for you, looking for you, stick to our show notes, because there's also a Sarah Thomas who was the first female referee at the Super Bowl last year. So
yes,
fun fact.
Yes, I'm proud to share that name of a fearless female in the world.
For sure. She did a great job as well and continues to. I'm always fascinated, and the reason I was digging, I'm always fascinated when individuals with rehab backgrounds like yourself, your foundations are in OT, how you got your start in interest in technology. And in doing a little research, I'd love for you, and kind of throwing a little question on you that came up in a presentation I saw you do. And it was the reference that you're kind of an old soul, and you have some foundations, I think, with your grandfather. I would love for you to share that about barrel making and how that, that really fascinated me. I'd love you to share that if you would.
Oh, sure. I thought I already went too long on my story, but I'll continue. It's fine. We'll go way back. There's a couple interesting things. So, one is my mom, when I was 6 months old, had me on her hip, and someone told her, oh man, she's going to struggle in life. She has an old soul. And my mom quickly pulled me away and said, what do you mean by that? She's like, oh, well, you'll see what that means, but she has an old soul. She's never going to quite fit in. And I think it pretty much lived to be true. I always have best friends who are 20 years or more. My senior, when I was 7, I became best friends with an 89-year-old, and I only wanted to go to his house and really hear his stories. And he was the first, we'll appreciate this from the Boston side of things, he was the first season ticket holder of the Celtics in the old parquet floor. And so I have pictures with me and Bird and Pippen, and we when they were in Red Auerbach smoking a cigar, because he was my best friend, so I just got to hang out with him. So yeah, I started just really having an affinity to elders in the community, wisdom in the community, all that they could bring. My grandfather was a cooper from Canada, and I was the first grandchild of many, many grandchildren, and the only grandchild who wanted to learn the art of making a barrel. And so we did that I made up my own hope chest, actually, where the females in my family had this beautiful hope chest that was traditional, and mine was a barrel because I made it with my grandfather. So I've just always had an affinity towards the elders in our communities.
I love that. And hey, I mean, as a fellow, New England guy, I know David's more of the Bruins fan, but as a guy who played basketball over in Ireland, I love that story. That was really cool to hear. And I think it goes back, like you said, it kind of draws out, when you think of OT, it's very hands-on, you're really trying to, take that patient to, and it's so then, especially with OT, it's like home-based, right? Like a lot is, how your home is designed, how are you really getting on with those activities of daily living that we always talk about. And like, as we open up this discussion more into like this aging space, I think I'd love for you to like define what aging in place means, right? Like we hear it all the time, and there's stats around, you know, a growing aging population from, what is it, like, I think it says 25 million today of people age 65, and by 2025 it's going to be closer to 90 million, right? So like, one, what does this focus within AgeTech mean, right? Like, how are you defining it, and like what's it mean for this population to come, you know, like that's going to, you know, often be in a bucket and dealing with Medicare and these complex things that are happening? Can you speak to that a bit?
Sure. Well, I might take a little different spin on it, but hopefully answer your question. I just think that, you know, going back to my OT lens, I always try to meet people where they're at and help them to develop their own aspirational goals and then help them achieve their goals. And that could be adapting the environment, that could be adapting a task, that could be helping them to remediate a skill and bringing them along their recovery journey from an injury or illness or situation that has put them in a place of vulnerability or need for strength and growth. And because I do that through a lens of really problem solving and activity analysis, I'm always looking at either the person that way, the task that way, the environment that way, the experience that way. And I bridge that world into AgeTech you're looking at products that way. You're looking at companies that way. Where are they now? Where do they want to be? How do you get them there? And so my advisory capacity always sits within that really OT lens, whether it's a product, a space, an environment, or brand. Or company. And I think I don't love the term aging in place. I think it's just a catchphrase that people have caught on to and moved along, you know, and just continue to use it, but it doesn't necessarily have that person-centric meaning as it's gone along as a catchphrase. But it really originated that way. It's the place of your choosing. It's the, where do you want to be in a day to experience your life? Who do you want to be around? What tasks are important to you? And how do we help you to stay moving through your day and your life in the way that you want to be? And that's not just, can I keep you home safely, which is still a place of isolation. It's where in the space in your life and the time in your life, where can I help you find meaning and purpose? And how can I help you engage with community and within the roles that you want? And how can I have you achieve your goals of social connectedness, of mobility, of cognitive stimulation, of independence with ADLs or IADLs? And how am I looking, maybe for me, how am I looking at technology to improve access to resources so they can do that, or adaptability of space so that it's more accessible for them and those tasks are achievable for them, really at every age. And if you're using universal design principles and you're using human-centric design, then it doesn't matter the age. It doesn't matter the disability. And I don't say that lightly. It means that you meet them where they're at any phase, any age, and you help them to achieve their goals. And so I do think we have to navigate, how are we paying for these resources? How are we bringing resources in for someone who does have a chronic condition or a situational setback with maybe an illness or injury, you know, recent stroke. You know, this is the stroke podcast. If you are going to have an immediate flare up of acute injury, or you're going to have then, you know, continuous chronic condition that you might be challenged with, and how are we meeting those everyday needs where you want to be, in community, in home, and in the lifestyle that you want to be living.
You mentioned aging in place doesn't really feel like it describes it well. How would you, is it thriving, or how?
Yeah, thriving, living. I think that it's living through movement. I mean, this aging in place always feels like a house you want to keep someone in, to me, instead of a lifestyle you want people to engage because of their preference and because of their own lifestyle aspirations. And so it's not that it's wrong. It's just sometimes you go then to brick and mortar and house and what's going to keep them there, because we don't want to put them into another portion of the continuum where they don't want to be. Maybe they don't want to be in senior living, or maybe they don't want to be in senior care. But to be honest, aging in place also means the place of their choosing, and maybe assisted living is wonderful for them because they have a sense of community and belonging, and some of their basic IADL needs are taken care of, so they can focus on the lifestyle they want and the freedom to express themselves the way that they want. And community living is beautiful. And so, we always think of aging in place, I think as making sure people can stay home, whereas home could be defined in many different ways for a variety of reasons.
Yeah, that's really well said. I'm glad we talked through that, because we, on our show, don't like two words. We don't like plateau in terms of stroke recovery, but the survivor component, we'd like to talk about setting the best environment to thrive in a life after stroke, not just survive, but thrive. And we got very excited on our last episode with Dr. Jay Rahman at Shirley Ryan Ability Lab. And I mentioned at the time, I said, this gentleman with PT background has like my dream job. So you get excited because you get to see all the tech, and you get to, use your training and in various roles in advisory and executive playing across the, from concept to seeing things actually take hold in the home. We talk about all the good things that coming out of lab and coming through all phases of care, like using Shirley Ryan again as an example. But we really want to know, like, how do we set that stage for success in the home? Because eventually, and a lot of our audience is younger, but you're going to get old once you've had your stroke. It's inevitable. You get older, and then we have these barriers to being able to stay independent in home. And how do you feel that are there organizations that are looking at specifically stroke in the home or rehab and setting the stage on that level for, I heard the terms used like hospitals in the home or care centers in the home. Can you talk to a little bit about that? And maybe if you've come across any folks kind of doing the heavy lift in that area as far as stroke is concerned?
So I don't know that I can pinpoint stroke in particular, and that doesn't mean that it's not out there specifically for stroke. But I will say that I think technology in general, when you start to look at how it can improve resource access, improve environmental accessibility, and start to look at first the problem areas. Well, first the person and what their problem areas are, where their challenges are in life, and move from there. So if you have a day where you are feeling immobile or are physically challenged and immobile, could you increase a little bit of independence by having voice first activation for lighting and for temperature? And can you then access, turning on the coffee pot remotely? A smart home is not just based of convenience and commercial use for the basic consumer, but it extends into giving someone freedom at any phase and with any disability, or whether it's permanent or temporary, to be able to bring them greater accessibility of their own environment. Can I check to see that who's at the door, and then can I unlock the door, and can I voice activate to allow someone to enter my home so they don't have to walk to the door? These simple things that are of convenience for many basic general consumers make a huge impact on someone being able to stay at home, stay safe, and stay engaged in their own livelihood and their own daily activities. And so I think this is just one branch of technology, but there are delivery robots, and there's looking at automation and looking at pill dispensing and med reminders and opportunities to have something set up once or supported once, and then supported through for your own independence with better cognitive cueing and better support of routine and safety, with someone maybe with a cognitive challenge for the next month. And that really improves the ability to stay in the place of your choosing, whether that's at home or independent living or in a younger population. Allows you to depend on people less, because there are opportunities to automate things and create better accessibility for cognitive and physical support.
Yeah, and one thing, again, like you've kind of been able to at least really educate me on, it's like that aging in space. Like you always hear about home modification, right? And like my grandfather, if we told him this, like, hey, home, like all he's thinking is like in that house, like he wants to stay there forever, right? But it's, as these new opportunities come, it's like I think it's the community aspect, right? It's like,
Yeah.
And the connection that technology could help build to that. But I think for like, just given your background, your experience like within UX and design, like I'm fortunate that I get to work with designers and like understand how they think, right? And it's a very unique skill set to have. And it's fascinating because I think, like you described from a OT perspective, it's kind of that same approach, right? Like you're peeling back, you're really trying to peel back the layers of like what this actual problem is and how to like different options to get folks to achieve an outcome. So can you speak, and we've had many product leaders on the podcast, CEOs, talk about great different innovation. Obviously David pointed out last week of all this amazing work happening at Shirley Ryan with different technologies, but can you walk us through from a UX lens, how do you go into a new product, a hospital system that is looking to redesign something, and like what are some of the approaches you take from a UX side, and like just kind of talk us through and explain for our users like what your role means like as a UX designer?
So I think it's all back to that human-centered, really understanding what are the challenge areas you're solving for. That's product, that's space, that's experience, it can be from a healthcare system to an individual consumer product. You're looking at you're looking at these design thinking principles. It should be really collaborative. It should be really iterative. You're working on it and having fun with it, playing with it from a place of trial and error and looking at this prototype driven methodology. And you first kind of seek to understand, and then you seek to explore further, and then you materialize. And within these buckets, you kind of have these design thinking principles of really empathizing first, and then defining, and then ideating, and then prototyping it, and then testing that prototype, and then implementing. But it's consistently iterative. And you have to define the problem first. What if you can't find a solution until you really have a clear idea of the problem you're trying to solve for? And if you're designing a new hospital system, is it so that you have people moving through it faster, staying in it longer, being supported, requiring less staff, requiring, being more attractive than the one down the street? Is it a marketing ploy? Is it creating better efficiency? Is it creating better outcomes? What are the goals? What are the true problems? Because there's a business use case, there's a clinical use case for each of these. And if I look at a home, it's the same thing. I've adapted an entire home for a one-sided approach, because if I was just to do universal design principles without looking at humans going to be using it and evolving throughout it, it wouldn't have been accessible for that person. So looking first at the human experience and iterating on the problem that you're solving, collecting all the information, collecting pictures and taking photographs and sketching things out and whiteboarding and collecting all the data that you can. And then, serving this as a source of inspiration to brainstorm really big ideas. Where do you want to go from there? And then how do you analyze it? How do you create solutions for it? And then continue to give feedback on those solutions, and then continue to improve. So it's, this is the design thinking kind of flow and methodology, but I believe that that's also how you design space and look at products, and even how you approach business.
Yeah, and to that business point, right? Like healthcare is such a complex position to be in, right? Because like we could ideate and come up with brilliant product that really solves that need, but at least where healthcare, digital health right now, digital therapeutic is, it's like to then get that reimbursement, it's, I think that's where so many of these barriers are coming in for the industry, right? And I'd love to get your 2 cents on, how do we design, but also get paid for some of those solutions that ultimately should be in the hands of a stroke survivor or other patient population?
Yeah, I mean, it's not a simple answer, but it is still going back to quite a simple process, and I think it's often missed. So I had a payer that wanted to invest in a solution that would help connect people with other activities and other people and other skills so that they would increase engagement per person per month and increase physical activity, increase cognitive stimulation, because they knew that the older population, as well as chronic conditions, we're going to layer the risk for them of requiring healthcare spend. Again, you have to go back to the center of who is the person you're solving for. And if you're solving for the health payer, if you're solving for the health provider, what are you trying to do? And this may not be the clinical approach to in the same approach as I'm trying to create a better outcome and I want this person to be able to do X, Y, and Z. So if you're solving for what should get covered and what should be reimbursed, go back to where are they going to save money? Where are they going to improve the beneficiary experience? Where are they going to attract more people into their plan? Where are they going to have better health outcomes? Where are they going to actually save on high-risk individuals or wasteful healthcare spend, and then work backwards from there on how your solution should help to alleviate some of these or create some of these opportunities with the payers. And I think I led global innovation for Genesis, and I can't tell you how many people came and told me, don't you care that there are so many falls in the nursing homes? Well, yes, I care about the falls. And I know that your grandmother fell and you created a product, but you did not talk about how are you going to operationalize that product? How are you going to increase safety and efficiency in the work environment so that it's actually an alert that's meaningful for the caregiver that's working there? It does help the individual, but are you only looking at the fall, or are you looking at the human behavior that caused the fall, that really initiated that movement at the beginning? And looking at that holistic connection, including the environment, is so important. But knowing what problem you're solving for and who are the stakeholders involved is really important. That's how we get it paid for. We start to prove all of those elements out, not that it just reduces an individual fall rate on a specific population, but that in a specific environment, it's making an impact, and that it is worth getting paid for because we have clinical outcomes and also cost savings on the system.
So, just to back up, so Mike mentioned like his grandfather and staying and thriving in his home. I'm going through the same thing with my mother-in-law right now in terms of trying to keep her safe, but not feeling like I'm putting so much tech in her home that I'm intruding on her privacy.
Yeah.
When you talk about solving who we're solving the problem for, who's doing the best work, like getting in and solving, and whether it be through focus groups, is getting in and not only educating, but finding out what our maybe our senior population might be comfortable with, and what is their sort of their tech IQ? Is it, like it took us forever to get my mother-in-law to, when she finally conceded that she needed some tech in the home, because it was that, or we needed to look at other solutions. Then she embraced things like the iPhone. She went from a flip phone to being able to connect with us and have me remotely troubleshoot some of the mobility issues she's having by just having a quick FaceTime call and talking her through some gait strategies or some transfer strategies. But it took a long time, like before she felt she had the knowledge, and now we pass things back and forth. Like we'll pass the AARP. When she sees anything tech related, she's passing the AARP catalog to me. And I just pushed over to her something that I saw that Best Buy Health, for example, is doing. It seems to be more in Canada, but they're doing like an online course. Because when we were first talking a phone and an app, like they're doing simple courses like what's an app, how to protect your privacy, how to connect to a smart speaker. Who do you think, like, and those are only the two that I'm familiar with, who do you think's doing the best work in that area, and also gaining these insights on if a tech is put in someone's home, how successful are they in getting up to speed and using it?
I think it's split a little bit. I think that somewhat the shift of awareness of technology acceptance and the data that's being collected around that is coming from the technology provider itself. So Amazon has smart home now, Amazon has for hospitality and for senior living, and they're able to capture usage and the data elements that are coming specifically around that type of technology, for instance. I think that the people who are touching the lives of the older adults with this information already had access to the older adults pre-pandemic, and when the kind of the increase of technology adoption was there. And I think it, 38 million members at AARP, they're already in the home, and now they can communicate, hey, we have these additional resources for you. You can work with these partners and they can help you. Here's technologies that are out there, but also here's support mechanism to help support your technology education and literacy. I think companies like Oats, I think Can Do Tech, I think Get Set Up. These are companies that are looking to say, hey, you might not know everything about technology. Let me support your consumer adoption and educate you in a slow and patient way while you're learning new technologies. I think that technology adoption overall, I mean, man, we all binge watch some sort of Netflix or Hulu over the pandemic. We connected somehow to our family and to work, whether it through Teams or Zoom, or some mechanism for telepresence. And now we finally look to say, okay, now I could access additional sophisticated resources like my doctor. And do I really need to leave the house when I just need to tell them about 1 or 2 symptoms? And do I really need to find transportation and parking and take a half a day, or can I have a televisit? So these are things we all, as general consumers, started to look at differently because our consumer behavior changed at every age. And then the adoption rate and the just universal use of improved. And so thus it increased in the older adult population as well. But I do think, the general consumer brands, CVS Health, Apple and Google and Amazon have certainly, Amazon and Amazon in a variety of ways have, increased access in the home. And then AARP has already been a kind of a consumer presence for the older adult. And so how can they educate and support through services and through new technologies?
Yeah, and when we think of the older adult, right, like there's always this need for the caregiver to kind of be taken into consideration sometimes, right? So I'd be curious, with the work that you're doing, like how does that caregiver role get looked at, and how are you kind of considering that for the population as well?
So I'm pretty bullish on person-centered control over data and information and their life. And so I think that the individual at the center of the health challenge, life change, needs to also open up their circle and be educated on how the circle can be helpful to them. But that's friends, that's neighbors, that's family members, that's paid caregivers, that's family caregivers, that's the health system and availability of health resources and health experts. And so I see a lot of technology that wants to target the caregiver because there is a great economic opportunity with the longevity economy and the caregiver economy. But if we're not considering how are those caregiver tools person-centric, and can the person, not just wear a wearable for wearable's sake to send this cowbell mentality monitoring to their daughter so their daughter can sleep at night, but can it actually change their own behavior if they alert them as well? Can they inform them on how to be safer, on how to to access resources along the way, and to open up, hopefully, that it is safer if someone can know about their whereabouts, if they did fall, if they did choke, if they live alone and they have isolation, at any age. I mean, heck, I've had health conditions this last year where I'm home alone, and I'm like, gosh, would anybody know if I even fell down these stairs? And I want someone to know, but I don't want someone to have a false alarm or to be calling me every second. And I don't want them to just have this information that only they know, but I don't know. I want these alerting mechanisms to be an opportunity for me to extend my care circle and my own safety and my own well-being. So I think there are a lot of great companies right now designing home modification tools, designing really person-centered wearables that inform not only them but the caregiver, whether that's paid or just a family circle, alerting mechanisms that then open up that opportunity for telehealth or televisit or immediate triage if they need to have urgent care or urgent support. So I do think that the technology is there, but I do think the design of the technology and the platform still need to be around what does that individual actually need and want.
Yeah, that was a brilliant explanation. And my question back to you just briefly would be like, whose role is it to educate then, right? Like to educate the senior on both like why this caregiver might be coming into their life, and then from a caregiver side, like what resources are there and how to actually talk to a loved one about some of these opportunities.
Yeah, that's probably where the breakdown comes in the system, because unfortunately you have to have your health provider that's moving them along the continuum from an ER visit to a primary care visit to a hospital stay to a primary care follow-up. And then hopefully the family is also alerted, because when they're home, they, family or neighbor, friend circle, their own personal tribe, who cares for them when they have a bad day. But our system is really pretty broken. And so the technologies that are helping to align the communication along that continuum, allowing me to inform others of my needs, allowing me to reach out to experts or even to just support food delivery, medication delivery, a telehealth visit, to access that. But it's not right now uniform in who is the one educating the patient, end user, consumer, however you want to call them, that the older adult who needs in that moment additional support. It's hopefully the social worker on a discharge plan. It's hopefully the nurse that's educating them on medication, that they take that extra step and follow up. How are they going to get this into the home, and who's going to manage it because there's cognitive deficit right now, or maybe there's some challenges that they need additional support. Who picks them up for the ride? Is it the person who is going to be there consistently, or is it an adult daughter or son who happens to be there for the week post-surgery, and then it's an additional caregiver that's a paid caregiver? And who is the one who's going to be sitting with the older adult, explaining to them what's going to be best for them and how that this is a supportive environment that they're creating? And there is no one navigation opportunity or solution right now. Rather, there's not a consistency in who that educator is, whether it's the primary care, a loved one, a family member, or an advocate, a care advocate. I think it's important to have someone that you have assigned or appointed, whether that's a family member or a case manager, social worker, counselor, that you have in your corner to help navigate these things. But it's really not easy to find that one person to navigate the whole system.
Yeah, and that's well said. And it's great that we have individuals like yourself that understand that, and the design process and the education process. There's still silos, there's still dots that need to be connected for sure. And I feel like we could keep, dive in deeper, but I perhaps we'll have to have you back on at some point, because we want to make sure that we get to our famous magic wand question. I know you're a fan of the show, but I think Mike gave you a little bit of homework, so I'm gonna he kind of put a little twist on the magic wand question. So I'm gonna hand the wand over to Mike to maybe see if you can bring this full circle with your answer to the question.
Mike, you're on mute.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, before we get into that, are there any, I know you talked through a lot of different companies in the space and, some of the advisory work. Is there anyone particular, maybe we haven't gotten to yet that you'd like to speak through that's doing interesting work in this space?
Well, we haven't really talked specifics today. I have a couple that I'm working with that I think fall into the categories we've discussed recently. I think that I'm working with Voice PT, and they're helping to design therapeutic protocols and exercises that can be done in the home with a voice first approach to it, but it creates better in-home exercise programming and continuation of the program that you've received from your clinician. I would say Ohm is really exciting to me. So they actually have a smart kitchen knob that can be installed in a stove and actually be collect a lot of data of stove usage and of just general behavior cooking in the kitchen, but it's also controllable remotely should there be a change of behavior. And so if someone left the stove on and had a fall or just forgot, it was actually started from a woman whose mother had a kitchen fire and she was not catching some of the cognitive decline that she had, but by only getting an alert when there's like a true change, and this has been on for a long time, you might want to check on her or shut it off. It could be remotely controlled, and really, to me, that's the type of solution. It's not just alerting you of a problem, but it's allowing you to be the solution. So I love that type of proactivity as well as data collection. I'm working with a company called Happy right now. They're trying to work on improving social isolation, and it's through both calling and listening, and you can sign up for both. You help to listen to one another on basic topics, and sometimes just someone being a listener also connects them in through community, and it also is a form of employment, so they can have some income as well, and that could be at any age. And so what better than to have someone who's home alone and potentially retired from other activities, and being able to listen to others and listen to stories and also have someone to talk to. I think you've both heard of Vivo, but it's similar on the fitness side. I know you had asked me before about kind of fitness and wellness. Vivo around bringing virtual fitness activities to older adults, and also helping to train older adults to perform the fitness activities and training. So I like the bi-directional support of older adult engagement on that into the home. So those are just a couple, just based on health and wellness that you had asked about. Home automation, voice first. I love Speak2 right now. I'm working with them, and they are really helping with voice first in home for hospitality and for senior living. And they have a really great platform to improve kind of the access of voice first and fleet management of voice first in the home. So yeah, just, I see a lot of fun things in a lot of sectors for different reasons. I know you always end with the magic wand question. I love that is, continuous, but my guess is we've touched upon a lot of that anyway, the process of how I would address the magic wand question, but happy to wrap up with that question if you want to take a stab at it.
No, that was excellent. Just to kind of pick it, like a lot of themes there, those companies you rattled off, like around voice tech, right? And using that technology to really drive a lot of different type of solutions. We just spoke to a guy from CardioCall, an Israeli-based company using voice to detect AFib. So it was fascinating to hear.
Yeah. There's between robotics, there's like all these categories that will just be catchwords, but really there's some people who are taking voice first to another level, and those, Alexa skills, and also people who are taking robotics and applying them in a different way for automation to really just improve independence. So I think it's a really exciting time.
Nice. Well, thank you for that. And, I think you certainly did cover a lot of what I would have hoped you would have chatted through in this magic wand question. For listeners, we always ask, obviously, how would you take the magic wand and redesign a stroke care pathway? Or what would that, ideal stroke experience look like in your eyes? What I put a little task on for you is to kind of walk us through, like, if you were that magic wand to walk in and, there was a recent article out of Australia that really called for a complete redesign for the stroke care pathway, where, you know, it's currently implemented as more of a disability sector. They're trying to really move it into a different direction, and that's going to be driven by, you know, the government funding and really like those complexities that sit there. But I do think you've covered it, and what I really loved about how you explained through the interview was the process of design thinking, and that continuous iteration, and kind of starting. You need to start somewhere, right? And like continuing to gather feedback and get things moving. But I won't put you on the spot and ask you to completely redesign things for us. I think you've done a great job to explain your work, really the approach that you've taken to many of the consulting projects that you've done, and, you know, an insider's view and an expert's view really on where this space is moving. So thank you for that. And I don't know, David, do we have anything else for it? I think we've talked it out.
Yeah, we covered it all, and we got this in recording this on Halloween. So we we also didn't have too many distractions. There was one point there where I had to keep us on mute a little longer for a barking dog, but we got through it. And is there anything that you feel we missed, Sarah, that you want to pass along to our audience? We'll put all your contact information in the show notes, but I'd like you to have the last word.
Yeah, I mean, I could do this in for several more hours in a couple of different directions. I think in this particular one, we wanted to talk about design, and so we did. I would say the only other thing that I get a lot of questions following up, usually on my talks, on how can people get involved, whether they're clinicians who want to break into something more innovative, or they're, patients who, or people who have individual physical or cognitive challenges. They want to try new things, but they want to, test new things. You can feel free to share my contact information. I'm always doing focus groups on products, new products, everything from the color selection and taking a quick class on the psychology of color, and then how do you react to a new brand, to the usability of something, feedback, and designing pilots with people of really any age, mostly older adults, but anyone with a disability or with a challenge that they might benefit from these solutions. Always doing pilots, always looking for supportive clinicians, patients, family members, caregivers to really be a part of our team at Delight by Design. We're recruiting several more consultants right now. I think, David, that Rahima just joined our team as well from Rehab Tech Summit. She is now a lead consultant for us, and we're working with her on various projects. So, I know clinicians usually follow up and say, how can I get involved? Happy to take people on in a variety of ways as we grow our independent consultant group. So if people have interest in focus groups or getting involved, you can send them my information.
Perfect. Well, we'll be sure to list everything in the show notes there. And I think, how you've highlighted the work of how you've been able to transition OT into your current career is going to spark a lot of minds, I think, on the episode here. So, thank you again for your time tonight, Sarah. It's been a pleasure. And again, we would love to have you back. I think there's a lot of different avenues we could go down with you. So
thank you, Sarah.
Look for that follow-up. Appreciate it. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Bye.